You know that old saying, a calorie is a calorie? Well, what if that's not quite right? We're about to look at a really cool little experiment that puts that idea to the test. And believe it or not, it all starts with just a handful of cashew.
So let me ask you something, and this might sound a little crazy. Do you think it's possible to eat a 425-calorie snack and have it do, well, nothing to your blood sugar, like zero impact? It sounds kind of impossible, right? But stick with me, because the results from this test are pretty wild. All right, so how do you even test a question like that? Well, it was actually super simple. Just a personal experiment with one very, very common snack. And here we have it, the star of the show, a little container of raw cashews. That's it. No fancy meal, no weird ingredients, just this one single food put under the microscope, or, a glucose monitor.
Okay, so to be specific, we're talking about exactly 75 grams. And that precision is really important here, because that specific amount is going to give us a very specific number of calories.
And boom, here's where things get really interesting. That little handful of cashews, it packs a whopping 425 calories. I mean, for a snack, that's a lot of energy, which sets up a pretty big question, doesn't it?
And to really get what's going on, we need a super quick refresher on macronutrients, fats, proteins, and carbs, the main things our bodies use for energy. And the key thing to know about our cashews, they're mostly fat.
So this is the big question, right? With all those calories, is this snack going to send blood sugar through the roof? The hypothesis, the prediction going in, was actually no, probably not. And that's because our bodies handle fat way differently than they handle carbs.
Okay, so the cashews have been eaten, the prediction is made, and now we wait. For the next 2 hours, it's all about watching that continuous glucose monitor and seeing what it picks up.
So here's the play-by-play. 3:15 p.m., down the hatch go the cashews. Then for 2 hours, from 3:15 to 5:15, that monitor is just tracking everything. And then at 5:15 p.m., it's time for the big reveal.
All right, this is it, the moment of truth. After 425 calories and 2 hours of waiting, what did that glucose monitor actually show? Well, let's just say the answer was crystal clear.
To quote the person who did the experiment, the line on that monitor was absolutely flat. The initial guess? Totally, 100% spot on.
So let's just let that sink in. The big takeaway here is no blood sugar spike. None. Even after eating 425 calories, blood glucose levels just stayed completely stable for the whole 2 hours. Pretty amazing.
Now, to be fair, if you zoomed way in on the data, you'd see some teeny tiny little wiggles. But, and this is a really important point from the source, those little ups and downs, that's just the body's normal background chatter. It wasn't a reaction to the cashews at all.
Okay, so we've seen what happened. The line was flat. But now for the fun part. Why? What's the science here? Well, it all comes down to the big battle, fat versus carbohydrates.
So the reason for that flat line is actually pretty simple. It turns out the kind of calorie was way more important than the number of calories. See, carbs are what really drive those blood sugar spikes. They break down into sugar super fast and just flood your system. But fat is the total opposite. It digests really slowly and has a tiny, gradual effect on your blood glucose.
This really puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? On one hand, you've got the cashews. High fat, lots of calories, but a flat line. Now just imagine for a second, what if you ate those same 425 calories, but they came from something that's mostly carbs, like toast? I think we can all guess that graph would look a lot different, right?
So look, if there's one single thing to remember from all this, it's this right here. When we're talking about blood sugar, the type of calorie you're eating can matter so much more than the count. Where those calories come from, fats, proteins, or carbs, is the real game changer.
And that really brings us to the final thought, doesn't it? This whole experiment gave us a crystal clear picture of how fat behaves. But it leaves us with a really big question, a cliffhanger, if you will. So, what does happen when you put those high-carb foods, like that piece of toast, to the very same test? Now that's something to chew on.